All right, we are live and happy Thursday, everybody, on social media, our network. I'm Brandon Lee, and this, of course, is my friend Tom Burton.
Good morning.
Hey, Tom and I were chatting this morning, and what we decided to do with a lot of these is we get in some really great conversations, I think, about some of these big sales topics. And this conversation just needed to take place in front of everyone else. And it was this concept of this inflation. We just found out figures yesterday that it's grown even more. Highest inflation rates in over 40 years. I mean, this is impacting companies, right? And it's impacting travel. And Tom, you were sharing a story or a situation with clients talking about if they are going to travel, they have some pretty rigid parameters that they have to follow in order to make sure that their dollars are being used effectively. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So, at LeadSmart, we work with a lot of manufacturers, distributors, companies that have large field sales teams. And, obviously we were working with them before COVID, and now we're, working after. And it's really interesting to see the shift in the mindset about the, I guess, justification may be the right word, as it relates to a travel and, in-person meetings, especially if there's airfare and hotel or car rentals, extra expenses involved. So, and in fact, we're releasing a new feature in our product LeadSmart called Trip Planner, so that sales organizations can intelligently basically build trips and trip plans that will really maximize their time when they're in a certain location. So if I'm going to go to Chicago for a couple days, how do I make sure I'm really maximizing seeing all the right people, seeing people that maybe I wouldn't have normally thought of seeing because, they're not normally on my route or whatever the case may be. Well, the reason that that's relevant, if we would have, the trip planner would not have been something that somebody would have cared about 2 years ago, to be right honest with you, right? Mm-hmm. Now people are, companies are really caring about it because they really want to make sure that they're when they go in the field, they're really getting the most out of that time and effort. They're really thinking through what they're doing, but at the same time, right now they have to be really, really great inside. It's not okay to just be okay inside. They have to be great inside so that they can be spectacular when they actually go to the meeting and do the field sales. So very, very interesting set of observations that we're seeing as we've worked with some of our customers and prospects recently.
Yeah, and then what I piggybacked on top of that was saying this. I've seen, of course, COVID drove all this, right? There's a lot of these sales leaders that, several years ago or prior to COVID were like, social media doesn't work. It's, cold calling, cold email, stick to the basics, and, everything about not virtual, that virtual was a joke. And then all of a sudden in a COVID world, like, some people, to name on names, all of a sudden there's books about virtual selling. And everybody's jumping on that bandwagon because COVID. Get it, fine, good business decision, got to go where the money is, all that, fine. But when I'm looking at a lot of the content, whether it's in a book form, it's in a blog form, it's in a white paper form, I'll be honest, a lot of it's just basic crap. It's like, make sure that you have a good webcam, make sure that your webcam is eye level, be aware of your background or use a filter. Like, no shit, right? Duh.
Right.
But what I don't see anybody addressing, which I know is what you and I are passionate about, is how do we virtually, therefore with social, how do we prospect? And I know this is still like, I use the hashtag social prospecting. I talk a lot about social prospecting. And when I look at SEO terms and all, it's not even on people's radars, right? And maybe you could say like, hey, Brandon, clue in, nobody cares about this, but we're leading the charge here, because if more and more people are going to be sitting at their desk, home or in an office, it doesn't really matter, but because gas is high and all this stuff, and they're going to be virtually selling, how do they recreate those field sales activities that help them meet people, introduce themselves to people, and earn and create those conversations. Because if you don't do that, I don't care how nice your webcam is. It doesn't matter. You're never turning it on because you're not talking to anybody.
Well, and I think it's a continuum, right? So it's not like you're never going to go meet somebody in person, but how do you use what you're doing inside to dovetail as seamlessly as possible into what you're doing when you're, and it really hit me. I was at a networking event a couple of nights ago. I haven't been to a lot of in-person networking events, but when I got to that networking event, most of those people I had never met in person, but I knew a lot of them because of LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
And interaction. And so a lot of them I had even no phone calls with, but I had, you know, engaged with them on LinkedIn. I had, whatever the case may be, I had done social, and this wasn't even a sales thing. These were some investor related things, but this was I was still, you know, had already built a relationship. So by the time we got to the event, it was like, oh my God, you know, it's like they wanted to give you a big hug, like, you know,
Right.
them and I think that's what the secret is how do you start building those relationships using social, using, you know, obviously phone and Zoom, or right when it's appropriate. And then when you go to that in-person meeting, you're way down the field. You know, you're now really getting the most out of that versus, you know, trying to just build, you know, the initial part of the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it. And so I think that, you know, transitioning from field sales to inside sales, I think one of the best pieces of advice that we can give people that are really good at field sales is don't lose your field sales playbook. Just apply it very rigidly into a digital world. And what I mean by that is the inside sales world is going to tell you cold calls, cold emails, email cadences, send a cold connection request, all that stuff that people just been, you know, pounding the drums and banging their head. And we look at the data and just go, nope, don't do it. What field sales have always been good at is understanding it's about rapport and relationship.
Yes.
That earns meetings, that earns lunches, that earns opportunities. And then when you get to that opportunity, that's where sales comes in. The inside sales model, the BDR, the SDR model, and you and I have talked about it, very driven by venture capital. It's pound for the meeting before anything else. And that's why I think a lot of those are just, you know, I had another friend tell me the other day, led a team of 12 or 15 BDRs, and he and his entire team were just let go. Why?
Yeah.
They weren't producing.
Sure.
They were no longer generating enough value and revenue for the company to be maintained.
Well, and I think you bring up a great point. I think a lot of inside people could really learn a lot from field salespeople that have built their career on relationships, right? Yeah. And then, as you said, how do you take those skills and those abilities and those things that I've used to build relationships and apply that when I'm inside? And I think, you know, BDRs would well serve to really start to understand the relationship aspect of it and how you build the relationship, and the hybrid aspect of that would go a long way. Because yes, especially when you're in a downturn or whatever, relationship matters more than ever. The trust matters more than ever, but it's how you're going about doing it is different than it was just a few years ago.
Yeah. Well, and it reminds me, I hear a lot of stories, and I just had another conversation with somebody that I met online, and his story is basically this. I was a BDR. I looked at everything we were doing. I said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing the cold calls. I'm not doing the email. So he started using social like a human, and he became the #1 BDR and got promoted.
Yeah.
Right. So you hear stories like that over and over again, but the lone wolf that does it is somebody that intuitively or innately goes and solves it and figures it out. But what I still don't understand then is how the sales leaders don't go, time out. How do we turn everybody into, like, how do we equip everybody to do what they did? And I think a lot of times right now, the answer is, oh, well, that's just what they did. And let's go back and browbeat the rest of the team to make more phone calls and send more emails. And I mean, I can't figure out for the life of me why sales leaders, I mean, I have an idea, which is lone wolf goes and does something and is successful. Great. But if I move the entire team to go do something different and it fails, I lose my job.
Sure. Yeah. There's risk, right? Or perceived risk of the change. You know, it's not even that what we're changing to, it's the perceived risk of the change. But that all said, we've talked about this over and over. The B2B sales and marketing process is so broken. And the fact that it's so broken is being amplified and spotlighted by everything that's going on in the world today, that this is, these shifts are going to occur, right? Some companies will get it and move faster. Some will move slower. The ones that move faster are the ones that are going to come out of this quote unquote downturn stronger and better. Because this isn't something that's just going to, oh, we're going to do this for a period of time and then we go back to the smile and dial approach. So no, I hear you, but I do think that I'm seeing it, right? I'm seeing it just in some of the examples I said earlier, is there is definitely a shift in a mindset that's starting to occur, and it's going to be accelerated by everything that we're going through.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, not to be like, woohoo, Funnel Amplified, but I can't help but say this, like, we've built Funnel Amplified for digital prospecting success at scale. Yeah. Right. Like this is about earning meetings more than anything. And right now your options are cold calls, cold email cadences, going to events, or figuring out this thing that's called social media, that you hear stories here and there of people that are good at it or have success, but haven't figured out how to do it or scared to make the change. Like if you're not scared shitless right now to make changes, you should be. Yeah. Because inflation's not going to taper off right now. We still, yesterday's announcement, highest in 40 years. It's not going to get better. Not in the near future. And that is scary. And if you're a salesperson or a sales leader and all of a sudden you don't have the budget to just hop on planes and try to go do things the same old way, what are you going to do except be out of a job?
Well, and again, right, it's not, even in a downturn, it doesn't mean people spend money. They just become more prudent in how they're spending money. And who are they going to spend money with? They're going to spend money with people that they trust and that they have a relationship with and that they value their thought leadership and their direction. Obviously with, products and services that they feel that they're excited about and they did need in the company. But it doesn't take a lot to figure out who's going to win during all of this and who is going to be left behind. And maybe you get away with the pitch slap, hey, I connect and like 2 seconds later, I'm getting and I'm still getting a ton of those every day. I'm still getting a lot of pitch slaps. I put in a suggestion to LinkedIn to allow me to flag pitch slaps. So I start getting a few of these things that are there. But at the same time, I am getting people that are trying to honestly build a relationship and add value. And it's well appreciated, right? And who are those people I'll do business with? Yeah,
absolutely.
But I do agree with you. I'll just say one more thing. And you bring up an interesting point about Funnel Amplified is it's great for the lone wolf to do it, but how do you build a team to do that? And I know that's what you've put a lot of effort in onto the Funnel Amplified side is not just how can one person do this at scale, but how can a whole team do it at scale and in a bit of a harmony, right? And as a concert working together. So I think that's the other thing in that.
Yeah. And I think now more than ever, we need to shake off the hangover of the last, decade plus of building technology and stop fricking looking for the easy button. This isn't a time for us to go, ooh, what's going to be easy? This is a time to say, what's it going to take to do it right? And then let's build the playbook to do it right and hire the people to do it right. I mean, that's the other thing is, and that's a whole nother topic we could talk about is that, sales success may be from different personalities than they've traditionally been from. If you tell them, I talk to sales leaders like, oh yeah, the problem is salespeople don't want to read things and they don't want to write stuff. And I said, well, then fire them, because that's what it takes right now to be successful as a salesperson. You need to read and be aware of what's going on in your industry, and you need to write or turn on your video or do something, because if you don't open your mouth in social media or in some sort of content, your buyers don't know who you are, what you think, or give a crap to answer your calls.
Well, what's interesting about that, right, is you hear, salespeople, quote unquote, are hard to find right now. There's not a lot of salespeople out there. They're hard to find. They're hard to hire. If you change the mindset or the philosophy, as you just talked about, of what a salesperson is responsible for doing, which is helping, adding value, versus just going out and trying to, get the next meeting or be harassing somebody, you'll get more people wanting to be in sales. People love to help. People love to add value. What a great way to start a career is really in learning, working with customers and helping them and working with prospects, if that's what you're doing. If you're pitch slapping them, who wants a job pitch slapping all day? I don't. I don't think a lot of people do either.
You have a whole generation of people. Let's call it like my oldest daughter, who just got her first job out of college, from that 22 to 30-year-old range, that they get content. They just haven't been empowered in sales channels to actually produce content and use the technology and the channels that they've grown up used to using in a way for business. It's like they do all this stuff through college. They know how they communicate with people and do all that. And they get in a job and somebody says, okay, get on your computer and here's our email cadence, and you need to pound the calls, and here's your KPIs. You need to make 100 cold calls per day. Like, it's just completely asinine to me, especially when you have the successes of people like Evan I spoke to the other day. It's like I was 400% more successful than the next closest person. And I didn't make any cold calls.
No.
Why in the world would not a sales leader go, how do we bottle that and recreate it?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's really change, and what's going to cause somebody to shift and be willing to make that change. But I do believe that is going to accelerate, and we're going to see a lot more change. It's even in the second half of this year.
Oh, I agree. I mean, if COVID accelerated a lot, which was great, but it wasn't enough, because I think people were going, we're just going to wait for it to go back to normal. Yeah. Well, piggybacking a global pandemic with high inflation in the United States, and we're not going back. Even if you think, oh, we're fine with COVID, there's going to be an event, I would predict 50% or less attendance on some of these because of cost.
Yeah. Well, what's the first thing that gets cut, right? Budget is travel. Travel budget, is one of the very first things that get cut. There's going to even be more scrutiny on when I'm traveling, why I'm traveling, and if I am traveling, what am I getting out of it? And what's the ROI on it?
And I don't travel nearly as much as I used to. Butch is chiming in here. Yeah, and Butch's specialty, right? Butch wants to focus on the older generation and taking what they've done well all those years in field sales and applying it into digital.
I think it's awesome. I think there's a lot that can be learned from that generation, and really, really help. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it's just got to be applied. Nothing has changed. It's just done differently. So, all right. Well, we've chatted at people here for a while. You want to wrap us up, Tom?
Well, I don't think this is the last time we'll talk about this. I don't think this is the last time we'll hear about it. I think we're in the early phases of this change. It'll be very interesting to see how this plays out over the next 6 months or year or whatever the case may be. But I guess, just if I were to, one last piece of advice is, even if you're not ready to make the change right this second, start looking at evaluating and investigating how you could make the change. Right. Start looking at as I say, as the mindset, start looking at the mindset, look at the philosophy, look at the strategy, start thinking that through, and then work out a blueprint for how to actually change it, and that's what we help with people with all the time. So.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Well, hey, anybody that's listening, look, if you've got topics, you want to come join us and talk about these topics, you know, reach out to Tom or I. Like, I think this is a really important topic now. And I think that, you know, Tom, I think you and I have chatted a little bit about this. We need to be a little bit more direct and a little bit more courageous. I don't know about you, but I kind of danced around like, hey, I don't want to offend people that think cold email and cold calling is still working. Like, I don't want to isolate myself by telling them it. And I don't want to speak in hyperbole and say that stuff doesn't work. I still think there's room for phones, there's room for emails, but the way so many teams are using it, if you're involved in a company at a BDR, SDR level or AE, and your KPI is about the amount of cold calls you make in a day, I think you're just in a dying space, like in a dying company maybe, or a dying department in your company. Like, it's just not gonna work.
Nope.
And at the end of it, you're going to be worn out, exhausted, and frustrated because nobody can handle that kind of rejection over and over again and just be like, oh, okay, no big deal.
And you've created a lot of pissed off prospects. So, which is, you know, that's called a lose-lose, right?
Yeah, exactly. Amen to that. All right. Well, everybody, you got more, you're watching this later, throw in comments, tag us. You want to come join the show, come join us. You want to come interview us. I like what Tom's doing. He commented, on somebody's post and said, how about if I come interview you on your show? Because I have a bunch of questions. And he said yes, which is awesome. So there we go.
All right. Thanks, everyone.